Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns. So this time of year, here we are 2 days before the New Year's, actually like a day and a half. Some of you are probably counting by the minutes, perhaps even the seconds, because I know so many people are just cannot wait to put this year in the rearview mirror. So we're almost there for all of you, okay? but this time of year, in any year, even in a good year, right, is a time where we naturally start to reflect back upon what happened in the year that just is ending, right? It's a nature of coming to the close of something, right? We're about to turn the page, so it's a very perfectly natural time, I should say, to reflect back on what the last 12 months have been like. And of course, for many of us, we feel like it's just been terrible, right? But I'm going to invite you to maybe do a little conscious practice on this and see if maybe that's really true or not, right? Because a lot of times when when we reflect back on the year before, right, the year that's just passed, and this happens every New Year's, right, and it's something we see in the television shows and the news shows and the magazines come out with their year-end review and all that kind of stuff. We'll see little snippets about maybe celebrities who have passed away or significant figures who have passed away. It's a natural thing to do, right? And the problem is that if you're not doing it while you're watching television, right, or reading a magazine, it's very likely that you might do it in a very sort of unconscious way, right? And this is not your fault, it's just the way it happens, right? So you'll be sitting at your desk, for instance, and all of a sudden a thought will pop into your mind about how something that happened in June or something is will pop into your mind, and you might tend to kind of get a little bit of a runaway train of thought around those kind of notions that pop into your mind at any given time. And so I'm going to give you I'm going to invite you to maybe take a little bit of a different sort of tact on how to kind of retrospectively view the year that's just ending now. Okay, because again, it's very, very easy. Most of us would have a very knee-jerk reaction to say, 2020 was terrible, right? There's even a song out right now on the pop radio stations that my kids listen to that is literally called F 2020, right? Meaning, the four-letter word for that's how they feel about 2020, and it's everywhere, right? You turn on social media, again, listening to news programs or what have you. I mean, I don't listen to many news programs, but I can only assume that this is true. But I certainly see it all over my Facebook and Twitter feeds and all that of how terrible 2020 has been and how much we can't wait for it to go away, right? And so what I'm going to invite you to do is I'm going to invite you to, and this is also something, by the way, that you can do at any given time. It doesn't have to be just about a year that's passing. It can also be at the end of a day. It can be after some sort of significant experience, like a meeting or a conversation you had with somebody, maybe an argument you had with somebody. It could also be something you do for your whole life, like something you look back at your entire life autobiographically, right? This same process could apply to any of these, okay? And so what I'm going to invite you to do is a couple of things specifically to sort of do this process, right? Now, it is very, very beneficial if you're into it to write this stuff down, right? To go through the practice I'm about to tell you about and write it down as a journal kind of practice, right? It's very, very helpful to do that. Not only do you get the ideas out of your head, not only do you get to sort of have almost like a conversation without anybody, derailing the conversation. It's just a conversation with yourself, but also just the process of getting it out with a handwritten process is actually very, very beneficial in many ways, in terms of regulating the emotions, in terms of having, sort of something you can read back to yourself, many, many reasons to do it. So if you are moved to and it feels comfortable for you to do this, then I would suggest getting a pen and paper or maybe even a nice notebook and writing some of this down, right? But here's what I would invite you to do. Again, anytime that you find yourself just sort of unconsciously getting into these kind of thoughts about what happened this last year and all that kind of stuff, when you find yourself just unconsciously doing it when you're sitting at your desk, you're driving your car or what have you, cooking dinner or something like that, in those moments, see if you can let it go, right? See if you can say, okay, I'm not going to think about that right now. And instead, perhaps you could, and again, this is an invitation to you. Perhaps you would be interested in taking a specific set amount of time, or a specific time, for whatever duration you want it to be. It can be open-ended. You don't have to limit yourself to the time that you consider all this, but to have a time where you're going to sit down and you're not going to do anything else except look back on the last year. And remember, this could also apply to any other circumstances. It could be, right after a meeting, right after a conversation, an argument. It could be for an autobiographical kind of thing, like your whole lifetime behind you. You can do this same thing, right? But intentionally taking some time to sit down and with intention and with consciousness and purposefully, really examine what has happened over the last year, right? And again, whatever time span you're talking about, right? And so there's a couple of things that are involved with this, okay? Now, number one, yes, setting the intention to just do this purposefully is going to be much more fruitful and much more beneficial than to just do it at random times and when the thought pops into your mind, right? But also doing it with intention this way, and with purposeful intention, it offers us the opportunity to do two really important things that are really going to help to not only get a real clear and accurate view of what has actually transpired, but also to be able to learn and grow through this process and grow from the experiences that we've had, okay? And this is the important thing, right? Because if we're just going to kind of think about everything that happened and we're not, adding any growth or any understanding into that, well, then we're just likely to create a cycle, a vicious cycle that's like a negative feedback loop that's just going to keep coming around and coming around and coming around. And then we just repeat the same mistakes that we always have, and we repeat the same sort of unconscious behavior and patterns, right? So the idea here of mindfulness is to open up those unconscious patterns and bring consciousness to it, bring awareness to it, and break the cycle and do something intentional and grow through that, right? And so the first thing that I'm going to suggest you do, I'm going to encourage you to do while you're kind of looking back on your life or the last year, or again, whatever it is. It could be even the last 10 minutes for whatever, if that's something that's important to you, right? While you're doing it, first of all, I want you to, I'm inviting you and encouraging you perhaps to remember the negativity bias, right? This is something I talk about a lot, right? And you might be sick of me hearing me say it, and I hope you're not, but the reality is that each of us human beings, right, we have this implicit negative bias, right? Negativity bias, meaning it's implicit, meaning that we're not aware that it's happening, right? It's and it's a bias, meaning that whatever it is that we're experiencing, whatever it is we're looking at, we are much more likely to see the negative aspects of this thing. Right? So again, if it's the year that we're looking at, like 2020, right? If the negativity bias is in control and in the driver's seat where it wants to be, then we are likely to just think about the difficulties, the lack of things like toilet paper and hand sanitizer. We're likely to think of the money difficulties that we have. We're likely to think of the inability to travel or go out to dinner or to basketball games or what have you, right? And of course, the reason this is there, right? The reason negativity bias is there is because your mind, your physical brain wants to show you only those things that are scary, because if you're paying attention to those things that are scary and negative, well, then chances are you're going to avoid them and know to avoid them. They're not going to surprise you, and they're not going to harm you, right? So as you're thinking back upon this last year, or whatever duration you want to do this practice in, take note of that, right? And tell your negativity bias, like go ahead and say to it, like, hey, listen, I know you're trying to help me and I really appreciate it. And thank you for helping humans, evolve over the last 150, 200,000 years. It's really great that you've done that. But right now, I don't want to just think about the negativity. I want to be able to open myself to all experiences. So I don't want to just focus on the difficulty of isolation and seclusion and quarantine. That's the word that I'm looking for. I don't want to just think about the negative aspects of quarantine, but I want to also think about some of the positive things that came out of quarantine. Like I got to spend some time with my children that I probably wouldn't have gotten to spend with them. It was frustrating, it was difficult, but it's time that I got to spend with them that I probably wouldn't have gotten to spend with them. And our relationship is richer for that. Right, so that's just one example, but there's so many others, right? And maybe you picked up a new hobby during this time. Maybe you were able to brush off an old hobby. Maybe you were able to kind of put things in perspective a little bit in your life. And so when we can acknowledge the negativity bias with intention, and we can say to it like, hey, look, thanks but no thanks, right? Just being intentional in that way, we are going to allow ourselves to see more clearly, more fully what is really going on. Okay, so I really invite you to do that. It's an enormously helpful thing to do for our own well-being, right? And then the next thing, and this is possibly it's definitely a little bit more important. The negativity bias is one thing, right? But the other thing that happens, and kind of in conjunction with that negativity bias, is that when we look back upon the last year, right, we are more likely, because of the negativity bias, we're more likely to notice things that we did not do properly. Right, where we failed, where we came up short, where we just didn't do what we had set out to do, right? And when we do that, right, as human beings, we have this amazing tendency to look at look at times in which we have screwed up, right? Times in which we have failed. We just laid an egg, right? We just did something wrong, right? And we have a tendency to look at those times and kind of, we scold ourselves over it, right? We punish ourselves for it, right? And we do so in ways that we wouldn't even do to other people, right? I often use this amazing little scenario that when I talk to people about self-compassion, right? I say, okay, picture yourself walking through a shopping mall, right? And it's really empty for whatever reason, and there's one person walking towards you. You're two about to pass each other, going the opposite directions, right? And all other things aside, you wouldn't even notice this person, right? There's nothing remarkable about them at all, right? Except for the fact that 10 feet in front of you, just as you're about to pass each other, this person steps in a puddle of melted frozen yogurt, right? And they just fall right on their face, right? Their bags go flying. They hit their face on the floor, so they're bleeding from their nose. Maybe they broke their glasses. Something like, oh my gosh, look at what happened, right? So I give you two potential responses that you might have, or reactions that you might have to that situation, right? Number one is that you put down whatever you have. Again, with COVID, maybe you don't actually touch them, maybe you don't get that close, but you certainly talk in a gentle voice, and you say, oh my gosh, are you okay? Don't worry. If you need help, I'm here. I'm not going to leave you. Just try to breathe. You're okay. Let's figure out what we need to do, right? Something like that. Or B, you stand there with your hands on your hips and you look at this person as sprawling out on the floor, bleeding, all their belongings scattered around, and you say something like, really? Really? You didn't see that puddle of yogurt there? You really didn't see that? I'll bet you fall all the time, don't you? I bet you this happens to you every single day, doesn't it? Gosh, how could you be this way? Right? Now, of course, when I put that scenario to people, they're like, oh my gosh, I would never say B. I mean, who would ever do that, right? And they're right? 100% of the people say, no, I would do A for sure. Now, different scenarios, same two potential responses from you, right? But this time, the scenario is something in which you have made a mistake, right? Maybe you fell in some yogurt. Maybe you, just dropped the ball on something. You did something wrong. You yelled at somebody that you didn't want to yell at. You maybe you ate a few more Oreo cookies or half a tub of ice cream that you didn't want to. Maybe you were impatient with somebody. Maybe you were, you allowed your temper to get out of control, and you feel very ashamed about that, right? Now, same two responses. Almost every single person in the world is going to use B on themselves, because for some reason we feel that when somebody else is suffering, we should be kind. But when we are suffering, or when we have failed, or when we have made some kind of mistake, boom, bring the hammer down, just beat up on ourselves, just really make us remember this, right? And the thing is, right, I get that instinct, right? I definitely do, right? Because if we're hard on ourselves, we motivate, that's the feeling, is that we're hard on ourselves, we motivate ourselves more, right? But the reality, okay, the thing that really happens, and there is tons of research out there right now about this, right? Over the last 10 years, there's been, study after study after study. I mean, hundreds, maybe thousands of studies have been done on this, right? That shows the exact opposite to what we feel, right? That in fact, when we are kind to ourselves, when we support ourselves during these difficult times, and in the face of failure, right? In the face of shortcomings, in the face of error, right? When we support ourselves and we're kind to ourselves the same way we would be kind to someone else, the studies are unambiguous that is what builds resilience. That is what allows us to persevere in the face of failure. Because the thing is, when we beat ourselves up over failure, we become afraid to fail, right? Because it doesn't feel good to beat ourselves up. Even though we do it automatically and we do it so often, the reality is it doesn't feel good to go through that. So therefore, we become afraid to fail, and therefore we become afraid to take chances. And when we're reviewing our life or our year or the last meeting or whatever it is that we're reviewing, and we're doing this, as I'm talking about, in a conscious way, then if we're going to be afraid of those spots during the last duration that we're looking at, if we're going to be afraid of those moments in which we failed or we did something wrong, well then guess what? We're likely not even to look at them, right? We're going to be like, okay, let's let that part go. And so when we do that, right, now we're not learning from them. And we're not growing through them. And we're not building any kind of resilience to them. All we're doing is we're ignoring them, which is just to invite it to come back again some other time. Right? So the idea then is to take this intentional time, make it an hour if you have to. You don't have to use the whole hour, but set aside an hour. And again, if you have a journal and you want to use a journal, go for it. But sit down and go through what has happened over the last year, right? But do so with two intentions, right? Number one, the intention of letting go of the negativity bias, right? Just really boldly looking at all of it. Right? And remembering, reminding yourself that you are likely to see things in a negative light, and try to balance that out with that intention, right? And then number two, apply self-compassion, right? So in those moments where you did wrong, right? Comfort yourself while you're thinking about that, right? Like tell yourself, look, hey, you did the best you could. You really did. With the information you had and the resources available to you, you did the best you could, right? And if that's not true, if you really don't feel that you did do the best you could, then remind yourself, hey, you can do better next time. You don't deserve to beat yourself up. Let it go. Let yourself be happy because you deserve it. Because this one thing that happened this year does not define the whole year. It does not define the whole you. It does not define anything really. It's just an experience that happened. And so, and again, talk to yourself in kind terms, right? Pretend you're talking to somebody else, because that's the trick, right? Like, if you see somebody else sprawled out on the floor, you are likely to be very, very kind to that person. But if it's you who's sprawled out on the floor, you're likely to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe how stupid I am. Why am I sitting here sprawled out on the floor, right? And so doing this is going to enable you to embrace both the good and the bad, right? And to do so with the understanding that, you know what, even in the times that are difficult, I'm here to help myself carry through. I'm not here to beat myself up over it. And see how that feels. If you care to do this little practice, I would love to know. I mean, I would love to know. Or, I mean, it's not even about me, but for you, you know, see how it feels to be kind to yourself. See what difference that makes in how you view the last 12 months or the last, you know, whatever. You know, you might be very, very surprised to find that it feels much, much different, and that you're able to more clearly and honestly look at things in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise. If you're beating yourself up over the bad stuff, and and that's also going to increase the likelihood of judging things, right? So this kind of leveling out the bad thing, the so-called bad things in our lives, with the good things through self-compassion, it enables us to really embrace the non-judging awareness of everything that has happened. Right? And again, that's something that's going to serve you very, very powerfully in your well-being forever. Right? So this is not just something you do on New Year's Eve, because the more you practice talking to yourself this way in kindness and understanding the negativity bias and recognizing that it's there, the more you do those things, the more it becomes your default to feel that it's okay. Like, you're gonna survive the down times in your life, the difficulty, the suffering that you experience. You're going to survive it because you are here to help yourself survive it. All right, folks, I hope you find that interesting. If you want any more information about this practice, if you want to talk more about this, please don't hesitate to reach out via email or send me a message on whatever platform you're watching this or listening to this. I would love to hear from you, and I'd love to help you to do this practice if you have any questions about it, all right? All right, thanks a lot, everybody. I'll be back in tomorrow. I wish you well. I'll see you later.